would move on to the scenario B of exercise 8, where there is an increase in the government expenditure from 100 to 150, and we are asked to calculate the balanced budget. We are asked to calculate the equilibrium level of income having the condition that we have just seen. In 8.1, you may remember that we have already derived the formula for our equilibrium level of income, which can be written like this. And here what changed was actually the government expenditure. The other parameters and the other variables were remaining constant. So we would substitute the numerical value of the parameters C1 and C0, and the variables in tax, investment, and government expenditure. So CO didn't change, C1 didn't change, tax didn't change as well, investment didn't change, but our government expenditure changed to 150. So if you do the calculation on your own, you would reach onto a value which says our equilibrium level of income would be 850 units. So the second part of scenario B is to calculate the level of private savings. What is financed by private savings? You have to interpret your results by way of saying, okay, the private saving amount is this much, and the private saving is financing this much of the investment and this much of the government expenditure. So first, in a usual procedure, we would see the private consumption first, which is given by the formula. Consumption is equal to autonomous consumption plus marginal propensity to consume multiplied by income minus tax, which is our disposable income. Here we don't have any change in the variables and the parameters, so we would just write the values that we got, and our income changed to 850 instead of 600 in the basic scenario. So if you do your calculation here, you would have a value of 650 euros for consumption. The second item that we want to see is private savings. What is not consumed is saved, as we have said earlier. So saving is defined by the formula my disposable income y minus t minus the amount of the consumption in the given scenario. So in our case, our disposable income is 850 minus 100 minus our consumption 650. So this is again to say 750 minus 650, which would give us a value for our saving to be 100. Do we have a balanced budget here? Let's see what our budget deficit says. Here we have said government expenditure is 150 while tax is 100. So G minus T, which would be 150 minus 100, would give us a value of 50 units. So to say the government is spending more than it collects in the form of tax. So here, as a different scenario to our first scenario, the government needs some sort of financing to cover this 50 euro budget deficit. So we have seen in the savings scenario where the households are saving 100 units of monetary units. So there exists a budget deficit of 50 units. The private savings are used to finance investment and the budget deficit. So the private savings of 100 units are going to be used to finance 50 units of investment in the form of corporate bonds and 50 units of government budget deficit in the form of financing the government bonds in our case. Now we would move on to the last scenario of our exercise 8 or problem set 8, where our tax decreased from an initial amount of 100 units to 50 units, and values are given in the indicated table. Here again we are asked to calculate the equilibrium level of income using the formula that we have already developed in first scenario. So this formula was already developed in the first scenario. We would just plug in the numbers. We would have 1 minus 0.8. Our autonomous consumption didn't change. 0.8. Here our tax changed from 100 to 50, so we would plug in 50 instead of 100, plus investment remained to be 50, government expenditure remained to be 100. Here again, if you do your calculations, you would reach at a value of 800 for equilibrium level of income. And the second item of this scenario C, as we have been following in the past two scenarios, is to calculate the private saving and to identify what is financed by the private saving. Again, we would first calculate private consumption, which is given by the formula private consumption is equal to autonomous consumption multiplied by marginal propensity to consume multiplied by my disposable income, which is y minus t. When I plug in my values that I have already, plus 0.8, here we have an income of 800, and our tax in our case is 50. So if you do the calculations in this case, you would reach onto a consumption amount which is 650 units. Moving forwards, we would look at private savings, which is again a difference between our disposable income y minus t minus our consumption amount. Our disposable income is 800 minus 50, and our consumption is 650, which would be 750 minus 650. And here in our case, our saving would still be 100 units. Do we have a budget deficit? So we have said our government expenditure is 100 and our tax decreased to be 50. And what is our budget deficit? And what is our G minus T? So this is again to say G is 100 minus our tax is 50, and we still have 50 units as a budget deficit. Again, the private savings are used to finance investment and the budget deficit. As you have seen above, we have a private saving of 100 units, and these private savings would be used to finance investment as well as the budget deficit. The households, they save 100 units and they get a corporate bond for 50 units, and they get a government bond for, again, 50 units. So again here, our savings are used to finance investment and to finance our government budget deficit.